The Turkish lira's recent slide against the US dollar was made worse by speculators dumping the currency. Now the central bank stepped in to stop that.
Borrowing Turkish liras that they don't own, selling those Turkish liras and buying dollars in exchange, and pushing down the Turkish lira. So what the central bank has done is it has put a cap on those swaps. So there is no longer an unlimited ability to do this.
And the Qatari state-owned investment fund says it will be pouring $15 billion into the Turkish economy. That's helped the lira rally more than 15% from a record low it hit on Monday. The currency fell to 7.4 against the dollar after US President Donald Trump announced the doubling of tariffs on Turkish steel and aluminum exports. On Wednesday, Ankara hit back. The US was the fourth biggest source of imports to Turkey last year, accounting for $12 billion worth of goods. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has now signed a decree that's targeting around $1 billion worth of these imports. It's doubled tariffs on goods such as rice, alcohol, and cars. That means a $32,000 Ford SUV is now subject to an extra $38,400 in tax instead of $19,200. That's taking its price tag to more than $70,000 for importers.
That's likely to put the brakes on consumers buying American cars here in Turkey. But it's not just US goods the government's going after. It wants people to take on less debt, and it's encouraging them to think twice before they swipe their credit cards.
Consumers can no longer spread their payments over a period longer than 12 months. The central bank says buyers must pay off electronics within 3 months, and credit card debt racked up because of healthcare costs can be split into installments spanning 9 months. The government's measures are helping stabilize the economy, and it says it's willing to work with Washington to normalize relations.
Our position on this matter is clear. If the United States shows a constructive stance, we will of course continue talks. We will show the Commonwealth to take the necessary steps to resolve this matter by diplomatic means.
But the US hasn't budged on its demand that Turkey release American pastor Andrew Brunson, who's under house arrest for terror-related charges in Turkey. On Wednesday, a Turkish court turned down his latest appeal, so the political rift between Ankara and Washington may not end anytime soon. Mobin, Nasir, TRT World.
And Mobin is here on set with me for more, and joining us from Paris is TRT World's editor-at-large, Craig Kapitas. Mobin, I'll start with you first. You've been out and about in the streets of Istanbul. What was the mood like amongst ordinary Turks today?
You know, they've been looking at this with a pinch of salt. We've heard various senior bankers like the Denizbank CEO Hakan Ateş a couple of days back saying this is a speculative attack, not an economic crisis. So that's been the sense, but it's changed dramatically over the past 36 to 24 hours, and two major reasons for that appear to be this clampdown on speculation, on short selling the lira specifically, and also the pledge of $15 billion from Qatar. That really seems to have galvanized support behind the local currency in the past few hours.
Right, we're going to talk about Qatar in a second. But look, meanwhile, the lira has strengthened, but it is still a bit volatile, isn't it?
Not for the weak-hearted. This currency has been moving wildly, of course, now in the opposite direction compared to what we've been seeing. And of course, the central bank's steps have also played in there. Effectively, the interest rate right now that banks are working at or being lent at from the central bank is 19.25. So, of course, there is that tightening from the back door, and perhaps that is helping, but the lira still quite volatile.
Yeah, indeed. Just in the last few seconds, it's gone from like 6.00 to about 6.01 and back again. It is volatile, absolutely, as you say. Tell us a little bit more about these other measures to get people to borrow less, because this is a crucial point, really, isn't it, in the Turkish economy? And one of the reasons that foreign investors in particular have kind of been sort of seeing Turkey as slightly vulnerable because of the large amounts of debts here.
Precisely, as in fact most of that debt, 70% of Turkey's external debt, is private sector. That's companies, that's individuals, and of course the government would want to rein in the domestic debt as well, which is of course more to do with households. So the steps that they've introduced now are sort of limiting the number of installments that you can take your unsecured debt, your credit card debt to. Of course, the lowest limit is for electronics, 3 months, no more than that. So if you're planning on buying a new iPhone or a Samsung, you don't look forward to being able to pay for that over, let's say, the next 12 months. The 6-month category applies to hotel stays, accommodations, etc. And the most sort of time allowed is for social services or healthcare payments or for taxation payments. So really sort of trying to make sure that people don't overspend, don't stress their budgets beyond a reasonable limit.
Yeah, it sounds pretty prudent to me, and iPhones aren't the cheapest phones out there anyway. Mobin, thank you very much indeed. Craig, let me bring you in. Let's talk about Qatar and this $15 billion investment from Qatar. How significant is this?
Size and scope, Azar, size and scope. $15 billion is roughly the market value of Deutsche Bank. $15 billion is the value of the car service Lyft. Over the past 7 months in the United States, $15 billion has been invested in healthcare startups. It is a significant amount of money arriving in Turkey at the precisely right time.
Yep,
Just to add
it
to
is.
that, as
Maybe.
$15 billion is also the amount of money that has to be repaid over the next 2 to 3 months. So definitely a sizable amount coming at much the time needed.
You're absolutely right, Mobin. Yes, Craig, Mobin raises a very good point there, that when we talk about the debt repayment schedule that Turkey has over the rest of the year, it amounts to about that. So technically this should see Qatar through for at least through to the end of the year.
Well, let's put a period and exclamation point at the end of Mobin's most accurate observation. I talked to one of the creditors, and as you know, Azar, markets are inhabited by wolves who strike when they smell weakness. And this creditor said, when will Turkey see the money and will it be invested wisely? And I think invested wisely in his mind's eye was precisely what Mobin was speaking about. Is this money coming in to pay off the VIG that's coming up on deck? I think at this point, let's not go there. This is a very good day for Turkey. Yep. Everyone was experiencing volatility fatigue. I think that's ended. We have the Eid holiday coming up next week. All the banks are closed. And I'd like to add this because I think this is very important in this context. The issue in Turkey orbits around the idea of credit and credit worthiness. Now, credit comes from the Latin, I believe. It's a matter of faith and confidence. For the past 3 or 4 days, very few people, investors, areas had any confidence in Turkey. The Qatar has confidence in Turkey. It believes, and it is going to help Turkey get out of this mess.
Right. So, Craig, I mean, let's talk about this relationship between Turkey and Qatar. Are we seeing something of a quid pro quo here following Turkey's support for Qatar during the economic blockade carried out by Qatar's Gulf neighbors, including Saudi Arabia?
Well, you know, I tried to call President Erdogan and ask him that point, but he didn't get back to me yet. I really don't know if it's a quid pro quo. My instinct suggests it's not. My instinct here suggests that this is a friend, the Al Thani clan down in Qatar, helping out their friend, President Erdogan, and the Turkish people. I think this is why it was done. I mean, look, Turkey was in dire straits. Everyone knows it. Forget for the moment who may or may not be responsible for this mess. Turkey was in dire straits, and the Qataris stepped up to the plate on this. And I cannot overemphasize here that $15 billion is a significant amount, as are it's so significant that it matches or exceeds most Chinese investment in the One Belt, One Road initiative that we've seen over the past 2 years.
That's an interesting point as well. I mean, the additional tariffs that Turkey has announced today as well, I mean, in a way, this kind of brings Turkey into the whole trade war story as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. And markets don't like to see allies bickering here. It reminds me of friendly fire, you know, during a war conflict, when one side accidentally shoots on against the other side, and then the other side accidentally shoots back. It's not a healthy situation. And again, I'm going to go back to this Qatar's injection of $15 billion in cash. I would suspect there's a lot of people in the United States Commerce Department and in the White House right now whose jaws have dropped to the ground on this.
Yep.
Let's remember, the Greek bailout, 3 bailouts, $360 billion. The Greeks have to pay that back. I've seen no paper, documentation, or evidence that the Qataris are asking for a dime back.
Right. It's going to be very interesting to watch indeed. Craig Capitas in Paris and Mobin Nasir. Thank you both very much.